Jason Kenney says the lockdown is over and that everyone should just get over it already.
And I would just say I'm not quite sure what the protest is about, because Alberta effectively does not have any more public health measures. They've all been lifted some time ago. And I would suggest that maybe people could find more productive ways of expressing their frustration. But maybe here's an idea. How about we all just move on from the frustration of COVID? How about we leave it in the rearview mirror? I mean, there are still some remaining federal travel restrictions, which we think are wrong. We have a motion in the legislature calling on the federal government to drop the pointless federal travel restrictions. But I guess the point I would make is we could spend the rest of our lives in this society arguing over COVID, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Or we could just move forward. And here's the good news. Alberta's emerging into a period of dynamic economic growth. There's lots of good news now and on the horizon. I say let's embrace that positive future, as opposed to getting stuck in the division of the past 2 years. Every family, every community, business, faith group, we all know people have been divided over COVID. Let's stop accentuating the division. Let's find ways to come together as Albertans.
Got it. So please forget what he's done for the past 2 years. Please forget what he said you had to do, what he did to you. Please forget how he and the ruling class, not just in Alberta, but across the country, exempted themselves from their own lockdown laws. Please forget that the term lockdown had heretofore only been used to describe prisoners locked in their prison cells as a form of collective punishment by an all-powerful prison warden. And now it's being used to lock innocent people like you down, to tell you if and when and where you could go out of your own home, and indeed who you could even have in your home. Of course, Jason Kenney himself didn't follow those rules. None of the politicians did. None of Kenney's team did. His own cabinet ministers broke the rules. So many of them were caught. His own chief of staff broke the rules. By the way, when that chief of staff when he resigned in disgrace, he still received his full severance. In other words, he got a massive cash reward for breaking the rules that he enforced on others. Were any of these ruling elites charged with an offense, let alone jailed? Are you kidding me? That's for the little people. Little people like Artur Pawlowski. We just unveiled a large billboard on the side of the busiest highway in Alberta, the main route between Calgary and Edmonton, pointing out a brutal fact that Jason Kenney has used the pandemic as an excuse to lock down and lock up more Christian pastors than even communist China did. Because I should tell you, Pastor Artur Pawlowski is in prison even now as I say these words. Why is Alberta, that claims to be the freest province in Canada, whose motto is strong and free, that's led by a premier who, when he was a federal cabinet minister, actually claimed to speak for religious freedoms, why is it literally the most anti-Christian government in the world in regards to churches and lockdowns, and still is today? Did China arrest and jail Christian pastors using the lockdowns as a pretext? So our reporter, Sydney Fizzard, attended a press conference by Kenney the other day, and he put a question along those lines to Kenney. Here, watch the whole exchange.
Hey there, Sid Fizzard with Rebel News. I'm not sure if my question would be best directed towards you, but right now, of course, you're investing in religious infrastructure, but I think many around the province have a concern that you may not be best protecting their religious freedoms, as we've seen with Pastor Artur Pawlowski. He still remains behind bars. This is well over 30 days. If you could just comment on that situation and maybe perhaps ease some concerns or just give some light to that situation.
So in Canada, we have something called the rule of law, where courts are responsible for adjudicating criminal charges against individuals, not politicians. So we have an independent judiciary. That individual, I understand, has been detained by the police because of multiple breaches of terms of release, court orders, as well as an alleged incitement to violence at the Coots border crossing blockade. And so that individual has all of the rights of any individual under the Canadian legal system. They are presumed presumed innocent until proven guilty, of course, in our system of law. And they have a right to access to counsel. They have all of that individual or any other individual has all of the same legal rights as anybody. So this is a matter that is before the courts. As a more general comment, I would just suggest that going to a very tense, combustible situation and inciting people to be willing to die and commit acts of violence for their cause is very likely to have legal consequences. And I would suggest that, nobody is above the law. No politician, no person that calls himself a pastor is above the law. The rule of law applies equally to everybody in our system of the rule of law.
Got it. So we have an independent judiciary, independent courts. It's all just so normal and so standard, you see. So this shocking takedown of Pastor Artur on the highway, a dozen police cars, heavily armed SWAT team, that's all just normal stuff, rule of law stuff, really just nothing abnormal about it, nothing political about it. No, sir, just really, really normal things you see every day. No vendetta at here. Why would you ask such a thing? And anyways, the courts say it's fine, so it's fine. Like that one judge, Adam Germain, who literally ordered Pastor Artur to stop criticizing the lockdowns. And if he did criticize them, he was legally ordered to immediately denounce himself and read out a little script that same judge, Adam Germain himself, wrote. So Pastor Artur gives a sermon in his church. He would then have to read what Adam Germain, the judge, wrote right afterwards to denounce himself. If he gave a media interview, he would have to self-denounce right afterwards. Yeah, totally normal stuff. This is the rule of law, don't you know? I mean, Artur had a lawyer and everything, so it's okay. It's just fine. Here's how the whole thing started, by the way. With Pastor Artur nearly 2 years ago, as I told you before, he was client number one in the Fight the Fines project. I saw this video of him being pushed around, physically pushed by police, and given a huge ticket for having an illegal gathering. That's what they called him feeding homeless people. Remember this?
This is not event. This is not your picnic in a neighborhood for the fun of it. We are providing necessities of life to those that you and your bosses refuse to provide. You got all kinds of events happening right now, and yet the Calgary's finest are not bothering them. This is the hypocrisy of this city. This is the hypocrisy of our wonderful, fearless leaders. Where is Nahat Nenshi, the mayor of this city?
They were ready to tackle me down. I was there with my wife. I really thought I'm going to be arrested. And $1,200 ticket was given to me. And I was told, I was threatened that if I ever show up again, more is coming, up to $1 million. Can you imagine?
Yeah, rule of law. A Christian pastor gets a $1,000 fine and physically pushed around by some bully cops for helping the poor. Rule of law. What are you complaining about? The Premier and Health Minister have a boozy party in a private restaurant that only they can go to on the top of their skyscraper. It's called the Sky Palace, and nothing. No arrests, no tickets, no cops pushing anyone around, no SWAT-style takedown. No prison, that's for sure. But it's as Kenny said.
Nobody is above the law. No politician, no person that calls himself a pastor is above the law. The rule of law applies equally to everybody in our system of the rule of law.
The rule of law sure applies, doesn't it? But that first part where Kenny accuses Pastor Artur of inciting violence, that's when Pastor Artur Pawlowski went down to Coutts, Alberta, the border crossing between Alberta and Montana, where there was a blockade. And Pastor Artur gave a bit of a sermon, a bit of a pep talk, a bit of a political speech to the truckers. Now, he himself did not blockade anything. He didn't participate in the blockade. He came to preach, really. But here's how Kenney described it. Let's hear that part again.
I would just suggest that going to a very tense, combustible situation and inciting people to be willing to die and commit acts of violence for their cause is very likely to have legal consequences.
Does that sound like Pastor Artur Pawlowski to you? You know, I probably listened cumulatively to 25 hours of Artur Pawlowski through the course of my life. That's a lot of Arthur. And I have never once heard him counsel violence. Never once. I mean, he raises his voice, that's for sure. He can marshal the language and direct words at someone harshly, that's for sure. Words, but inciting violence, I've never heard of it. I mean, this is more his style.
Get out of this property. Immediately get out. Get out of this property immediately. Out. I don't want to hear anything. Out of this property immediately. I don't want to hear a word. Out. Out. Out of this property immediately until you come back with a warrant. Out. 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 Out of this property. Immediately out. Immediately go out and don't come back. I don't want to talk to you. Not a word. Out of this property. Immediately out. I don't care what you have to say. Out. Out. Out of this property, you nutties. Out. Out. Gestapo is not allowed here. Immediately, Gestapo is not allowed. Out. Do you understand English? Get out of this property. Go. So go. Go. And don't come back without a warrant. Out, Nazi. Out.
Now that's being angry, but that's not violence. That's just hollering with a bit of a righteousness. But you heard Kenney.
Going to a very tense, combustible situation and inciting people to be willing to die and commit acts of violence for their cause.
Did he really do that? Well, I got to tell you, I hadn't actually watched Pastor Arthur's speech to the truckers before. So yesterday, after I saw Kenney's comments, you know, his description of it sounded pretty shocking. And, well, you know, that just didn't jive with what I know about Arthur. Seriously, going down there and telling people to die and be killed or get violent? You sure? No. It's just another lie. Here, now it was a 19-minute speech spoken in a restaurant, not even at the blockade itself. If you followed our Coots coverage, you'll recognize this restaurant. Arthur was basically giving a dinner talk, a pep talk. You can find the whole 19-minute speech for yourself on Pastor Artur Pawlowski's Facebook page. That's where I found it yesterday. But here's a sample of a few of his points. Now, I promise I'm not taking anything out of context or leaving out any calls to violence. I just want to give you a flavor for the speech.
In a shipyard in Gdańsk. And there were groups of people, and Lech Wałęsa got everything he wanted, and he was ready with a piece of paper coming out saying, "We've won, we got it." And there were bus drivers outside and the train drivers outside, and they said, "So you've won your rights, what about our rights?" And he stopped. Will you, and this is why you have this famous solidarity movement, because when he was stopped, he looked at the people that were outside under the hammer of the boots of the Soviets, and he said, "Yeah, you're right, we got what we wanted, but what about you?" And here is this lady, this is what she said: "Will you stand in solidarity with the rest of us? Because you guys got what you wanted, but what about us?" So when I decided to come here, I'm risking to be arrested at every moment, everywhere I go. There are criminal charges on me, left and right. We lost count of the charges I have right now. But I decided to come here because I believe that the eyes of the world are fixed on this place, right here. Just before we are going to get our freedom, I'm telling you, give up. Right before thousands of people are willing to come to support you, now you're going to abandon them. What are you going to say? Oh, we've changed our plans? What are you going to say to those today and yesterday? Every single minute I got thousands of messages. Thousands. I mean, this thing never stops. People saying, we're coming to courts. We're coming to the Milk River. We're coming to support. We're bringing. What do you need? What do they need? We're coming. Thousands upon thousands of people are coming. They don't have enough RCMP officers to deal with that. They don't have enough army to deal with that. Remember, you have the power now. Do not give it away. There was an order to shoot the protesters, to kill them. But because of the American media, they backed away from doing this because they knew the whole world will see what is happening in Gdańsk in 1980. Right now, the whole eyes of the entire world are fixed on this little place. And you can do the right thing, or you can park and honk around parliaments, legislature, fine. But I'm telling you, they're honking around parliament right now for a week. How long are we going to be honking? For a month? For two? They're not really afraid of our honks. What they're afraid of is this. People coming together and paralyzing their system. Polish people did it the right way. They said, we shall not cooperate with the villains. We do not work for the KGB and Russians. We will not work for you anymore.
In fact, you could see that Artur Pawlowski took pains to repeat that if he used vigorous language, it was only metaphorical, it was only figurative, not literal. He used the word like fight, but he immediately explained 3 times that he meant only a peaceful revolution, a peaceful fight. Here's a few instances of that, just to show you what I mean.
It's about time for Canadians to rise up and start roaring.
Let's go! Let's go!
I'm talking about peaceful resolution. I'm not talking about guns and swords. You see, this image right here, it was the most powerful thing I could ever do. And it went viral all over the world because it showed simply me on my knees in the middle of the highway being taken by SWAT team. Why? For inciting people to come to church, participating in illegal church gathering, and officiating a church service. Who do those people think they are? Who do they think they are? Kenny, who do you think you are? If you don't do that, you be very careful. Because you have never seen an angry Albertan yet. And I'm again not talking about violence, I'm not talking about swords and guns and all that stuff. You've got the most powerful wings ever. Who can move 1,000 trucks? Who can move 10,000 truckers?
We can.
With 100,000 supporters. I am calling right now every Albertan not to go to Edmonton, but to come here.
Thank you.
Come here. I know what I'm talking about. I know because I lived through it. And I'm telling you, for the sake of your children, here is your opportunity to hold the fort. Do not break the line. Don't do it. And may God help us all, because we don't fight with guns and swords. We don't fight with tasers and the police vehicles. We don't. We just want to go back and work hard and achieve something and provide for our families. We just want to be left alone.
There is no way to watch that 19-minute sermon pep talk speech and possibly conclude that he was inciting violence. No chance. I'm sorry. That is a lie. If I had 19 minutes, I would show you the whole thing for yourself right now. Go find it. That's just like when Jason Kenney said those same Coots truckers rammed a vehicle into a cop. Remember when he said that? It was a lie.
I've also received reports in the last hour of people allied with the protesters assaulting RCMP officers, including in one instance trying to ram members of the RCMP, later leading to a collision with a civilian vehicle in the area. This kind of conduct is totally unacceptable.
It was such a lie that the RCMP themselves felt compelled to refute the lie. No one rammed anyone. Kenney was lying. It was a regular fender bender. There was no political motive behind it. Here are the cops calling out Kenney's lie.
Of any physical altercation between RCMP officers and protesters. Yesterday, when we had protesters go around and breach the roadblock set up on Highway 4 to the north, there was some public safety concerns there and officer safety concerns there that took place. Their vehicles traveled through ditches and through fields to get around the roadblock and then onto Highway 4. They were traveling southbound on Highway 4 in the northbound lanes, and that was happening at the same time we had a few vehicles leaving the protest and traveling northbound in the northbound lanes. So we had a traffic meeting head-on the double-lane highway there. We did have a collision take place. A head-on collision occurred as a result of all this between a person trying to reach the blockade and a person who was just traveling north on the highway. Unfortunately, it was a relatively minor collision, but a confrontation which led to an assault took place as a direct result of that collision.
And that was an assault on an RCMP officer?
No, that was an assault between the two civilians, between a protester and a civilian.
So Jason Kenney's statement was not true at the press release?
I can tell you what I just told you, sir.
Okay, all right. And can I get your name and badge number, please?
You can have my name. It's Corporal Curtis Peters. I'm the spokesperson here. My badge number is 52957. I've never been asked that before.
Standard procedure, Ross. Thank you so much.
Yeah, things aren't back to normal in Alberta. It is not normal to keep a Christian pastor in prison because of a health order. And it is not just part of a normal rule of law system that keeps hounding Artur again and again and following him with a SWAT team. Sorry, that's not normal. Those are political instructions issued by the Premier to the Health Minister, which then instructs a special health prosecutor to go after Artur. There's nothing normal about it. Now, they've been doing this for 2 years. You saw that first instance. They haven't stopped. Jason Kenney jails Christian pastors. Pass it on. That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.